My name is Tim from Signagelive, and we are welcoming back Jason Cremins, CEO and founder of Signagelive. Thank you very much for joining again.
You're welcome, Tim.
What are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about the proposition which we call headless or composable signage.
That's something that we talk about a lot internally. We know the customers that are using it are very familiar with what it is, but it's a complex beast to understand if you've never used and or heard of headless before. So where do we begin explaining that?
Okay, I think the first thing to do is to try and define how is it different to what we have as Signagelive that people understand, that they log into. So I think that effectively there's Signagelive as a platform has been built to be API first.
And what does that mean?
Yeah, so API first means that we have an interface with all of the capabilities within Signagelive. Then it can be exposed to a third-party application. So someone could then build on top or create workflows on top of that. It's fair to say, we always say that we are consumers of our own APIs.
Right.
So when you log into Signagelive, everything that's interacting with the core platform is done through our own APIs. Okay. So it means that instead of it being the Signagelive experience that we've determined that you need, is that you can build your own experiences, all the capabilities. So really, the Signagelive engine that sits under the hood that does everything is exposed then to developers to build off.
So if I'm a developer and I'm looking at a situation where someone has tasked me from an enterprise solution to say, we need an ability to deliver media to screens. We need these pieces of functionality, but it also needs to integrate with our own toolset we already have built in-house. That's where this could come in, where they could say, instead of you having to start from scratch, bare bones, how do we make sure an MP4 file is supported on a device? That's where you can kind of start to pull at the strings of Signagelive and take the pieces that you need.
Yeah, I think we have one kind of master network API, as we call it, which gives you access to everything within Signagelive. So whether that be the management of users, the management of the licenses, through to media, devices, all that information is available through code. We always say that we have more capabilities in code than we do within the user interface, because inevitably there's additional functionality that's developed that hasn't yet been released either into the UI or it's been developed specifically for our API customers. So you're absolutely right that there's different use cases, one of which is that a corporate organization has their own digital asset management platform. They have their own way of actually using content approvals within their own platforms, and they want the ability for Signagelive just to communicate with that, receive all that content, and then do what we do, which is get that media down to the screen and prove it's all working okay. So that's when you would effectively use the APIs to deliver that. The other angle that we're seeing is that Signagelive is a component of an overall solution.
Right.
And the partner, the integrator, or the end user wants to have a single pane of glass where they want to see everything that Signagelive is doing, in addition to maybe monitoring some third-party devices or monitoring the network devices and having a single dashboard for that capability. So again, using our APIs, you can do this alongside maybe other APIs or other comms and actually bring that together as a holistic solution.
And when we're talking about this, because obviously we are now talking very kind of higher end development, this is not going to be for a 1 or 2 screen project. This is for most likely blue chip multinationals that need that kind of infrastructure built out. Do you have customers using the headless proposition today? Not that you'd be aware that Signagelive is being used in there. So that's kind of the point. It's meant to be taking away an additional amount of work that would take to develop what you want to, whilst having completely your own platform. There's no Signagelive branding that turns up. There's no requirement to use the user interface or any of those pieces. You just simply take the code that we've built within Signagelive and then take the pieces that you want to create your own project or whatever it is that you're trying to deliver. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And from our point of view, we're completely abstracted from that. We truly are the engine. The car you drive is what you've designed, basically. And I think that's the power of it, is it's incredibly comprehensive, as we said. Every feature and some that we've developed is available through that API and others that we have. And it's what we will do with partners who are interested is to directly put them in touch with our development team, work out a scope of what they're trying to achieve, and help kind of narrow down the ways in which that can be done.
Right.
Provide example code and all those other things that are required, so that it's a very curated subset of the API capabilities that they're then working with to achieve their goals. Because otherwise you wouldn't be looking to directly recreate Signage Live and
No.
everything we do is going to be a particular function or a workflow or a UI that you want to develop on top of the data. So we try and do our bit just to narrow that down.
And so with that in mind, and obviously with the customers that have it today, one of the things that we do get asked, one of the things that we can kind of pride ourselves in is all of that documentation is available online. So it's not kind of hidden or pushed away under some kind of contact us form. It's available. I think it's signagelive.com/build.
Or build.signagelive.com.
Build.signagelive.com. And that has the network APIs, it has the web triggers APIs, and it has the widget development framework as well, right?
Correct.
I think those are the three that are on there, unless there's another one I'm thinking of.
They are the main ones that are on there.
So that, because that obviously ties in, you've got the widget development framework, which is something else that's available for them to build into. So creating applications that will run within Signage Live onto the players. If that's the right way of kind of describing it.
Yeah, I think the widget development framework is probably an episode in its own.
Yeah.
But what it does ultimately allow you to do, as you quite rightly said, is we've built this very enhanced HTML widget capability, which is very robust. It works offline. It can pull information from the player. It can synchronize data. It can do a range of different functionality. You can expose certain capabilities within the UI, within Signage Live as well when you're editing the profile of the widget. You can deploy a single widget to a range of displays and players, and then have the ability for them to react and change based on where the player is, the location. This is a whole capability around that. But yeah, it's for people who are familiar with building HTML applications and want to deliver them as apps to digital signage devices in an incredibly robust way.
So that when you're using the network API as your starting block, or you're building out with the Signage Live APIs, if you pick the right piece of code that you wanted to build into, you could then utilize creating those widgets and sending them through the network API. And it's the same infrastructure.
Absolutely, because it's exactly the same. You know, if you're pushing media, you can create those widgets in your own development environment and then use the network API to transit those down and deliver those to the devices. Yeah, absolutely.
And obviously the other benefit I'm assuming from the API perspective is all of the supported devices and players and all of the testing that we continue to do ongoing for those devices is included in that, because it's the same network, same access, same player testing.
Yep, absolutely. And that's the thing that we pride ourselves on, is we've got 40 probably different platforms that we support now with different variants, manufacturers, operating systems, etc. And we need to ensure we've got that backward compatibility with previous iterations and panels, especially with the SoCs. They've been around for 10 plus years now, but also be aware of what's coming next and make it a completely seamless transition for our customers and partners, so that they can with confidence deploy an application and then we take care of the rest. So I always say, for example, each device and each screen that we support, the technical ability to say play video within that is completely different. But from a widget development point of view, that's something you just say once. We deal with the rest. We work out how you play video. So I think that's a key thing that we've done with the widget development framework to achieve that.
I think that's interesting, because I had a conversation, must have been a few months ago now, with a guy who came on the show, and he'd built his own CMS from scratch for a sports arena. And I think his general consensus at the end of it was, he spent most of his time trying to figure out how certain media would play on certain orientations, different devices, different firmwares, different models. So just to have that lifted to say, that's a Signage Live responsibility. You'll deliver whatever you need to, and as long as it's media file X, you'll have the comfortability to know it would be deployed across your entire network, and that's what we look after in that sense.
It is, and we're continuing to add to that without talking about future releases, but it's on the public roadmap that we're going to be adding kind of content optimization and content coding as well. Again, that further extends that, so you can throw a video and we'll make sure that video will work on all the different devices, and ultimately when it says play, it will play on those devices as well. I think the other key thing as well is that there's always enhancements to the widget development framework that come from user requirement. And then what happens within the development and QA team is that we'll have this kind of need to level up, to use a very current overused term, but the ability to go, right, it's now working on X. We need to now make sure that all of the devices have actually got that capability. So there's an ongoing body of work with the development team to actually just make sure that we're continually investing in that player architecture.
Perfect. Anything else that people should be aware of when it comes to headless development? Do you feel like covers what we need to discuss?
I think it covers the main things. I suppose the final part is there's a big move towards no code and various other areas as well, so that the ability to actually communicate with Signage Live and build applications is getting easier and easier. And I think in a future episode we may well talk about some of those topics. But I think it's moving away from being purely the domain of the developer to be able to build and integrate with Signagelive and opening that up to maybe people who are more product focused. And that'll be an interesting trend because we're well prepared for that. And I think equally, one of the things that we're looking to do is to ensure that all of our APIs are really available and accessible for the future generation of AI and agentic platforms as well.
Right.
Because we want to make sure that if people want to talk to us through their chosen platforms and something happens over here, go do this using Signagelive, is that we become part again of that kind of agentic ecosystem that's being built out over future months and years.
I know you've been doing quite a bit of research behind the scenes here, which is so we can probably cover that in a completely different show on its own. But
Yep.
It is interesting. It's being able to see behind the scenes the complexity that it takes to make something that's easily to unify across all of these platforms. We're talking about a huge amount of development work, huge amount of time and consideration for future-proofing the way the platform works and is able to integrate with all of these new potentials that maybe aren't even built today, but in 6 months' time would have just spun up, and now we need that ability. So it's an interesting time to see all of the work that candidly Signagelive has been doing since its inception, to have it documented, to have it structured in a way that people can access. And now, aside from the customers that are using it today, what does that mean for third-party applications that want to build in or build on their own? Suddenly, we're very well positioned to have that conversation and go, we've been doing this for a really long time. Our code isn't going to change anytime. It's structured here and always has been. And I think especially as we have these customers that have used the platform for tens of years, under the hood, as you say, like as their own engine, it's just a proof that it's not something we talk about in theory. No. It's something that's working today. There are probably more screens running Signagelive today that aren't running through the Signagelive UI, or it's close numbers where you go.
It's pretty split.
So there is a huge body of work under the sea of what you see today from Signagelive that's actually being utilized because of that structure and because of the forethought of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key thing is that a lot of customers get frustrated with the user experience that's prescribed by the CMS, because we all do the same thing ultimately, which is to get content onto a screen, but we've all got our own way and view of how that should be done. And I think what this does is says, well, kind of almost reimagine that. If you've got your way or you've got your workflows that you have within your business, build it. We can then consume that, and that becomes part of what we do with the APIs.
Yeah, I've seen certain companies that have gone to the extent of really just building from scratch entire infrastructures that run the whole company. It's like a Salesforce of their own that they've just said, no, we're building this. And they've invested years of building this platform out, and they just keep building that out, and it's robust enough and sticky enough to the point now they don't want to drop that. That's their business is basically running this program, this application. So to be able to say, we want to be able to deliver content on the screen, but we want it to be in-house with everything else. They can just say, pull the player support, pull the playlist creation, pull the approvals, whatever they want from Signagelive, and just build it into their user profile that they have there. With granular user permissions, you can do that as well. Just have that freedom and flexibility of pulling what you'd like, leaving behind what you don't want access to, and just building it into your own user infrastructure that makes sense to your company.
Yep, no, absolutely that.
Cool. Well, another riveting show. Thank you, Jason. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Tim.
All right, I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks a lot.